I could not stop reading and watching videos on this last night. It was just mind-blowing because it was one of those things as a former player that you look back and you think, what would my career have been if I had access to this information?
Level. This is why.
All right, guys, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about motor preferences. Matt Swope, the head coach at Maryland, has a brand new book out with David Genest, who is one of his business partners, and it is Motor Preferences for Baseball. Now this, in my opinion, I just bought the book. I've read a few chapters last night. I've been watching some videos online. This is revolutionary in baseball development and evaluation. And Swope's whole process of getting to this was his search to figure out, how do I just coach every player as individually as possible, right? We've all been there as coaches where you think this guy, this is going to work for him, or this is going to work for him, or you've had those players where you give them advice and give them some stuff to do, and it just doesn't seem to work. So today I wanted to cover one of the basics of motor preferences, which are the two categories that players are put into. And again, we're going to get right into it. Make sure you guys, if you're interested, scan one of our QR codes, either for the ARM program, our recruiting advising QR code, or if you just want to ask some questions, hourly consulting with me, scan that QR code. But we're going to get right into it. So guys, these two categories are almost exact opposites in how their bodies function, how their bodies move. And so the first one is terrestrial. And you can probably tell by the name of how they like to function. But the second one is an aerial. Now, the differences between these two are enough to make your head spin. And it's funny because and I'll give you, there's ways to identify these. And obviously, if you guys get the book, I highly recommend it. Go get the book, Motor Preferences for Baseball. It's a little bit complicated at first, but they do a great job. And so far, through the amount of the book I've read, and I'm going to keep doing videos on this as I continue to get kind of deeper into the book and obviously deeper into some research. It's complicated at first, but they do a great job explaining it. And the differences in terrestrial and aerial are, terrestrials like to be in flexion. Now, what does this mean? It means they like to have their legs bent. They're in flexed positions, right? They're not an extension. They're not standing straight up and down. They're not having a long arm, right? They're in complete flexion. Their lower half's in flexion. And these are your hitters that you really see, that front knee of a hitter bending a lot as he's rotating and then coming to extension at contact point. We've all, as hitting coaches, we've all coached hitters where some of them just land and they're just at extension right when they land. And some of us, that was in a lot of areas, you would look at that as, we want to see a little flexion there, because that flexion is going to allow you to buy time and be adjustable to off speed. Well, the reality is, if you're an aerial, your body prefers to be an extension. And what Matt talks about in a lot of the videos you can see online, but also in the book, is that this was the thing that just kind of blew his mind about development, because I always worked with guys who, these drills I would do with guys worked for a lot of guys, and then there would be those few guys where you give them the drill and it just doesn't look good, they can't do it. And one of the kind of core principles of motor preferences is, if you're watching a player do a drill and it just, no matter what he's trying, he cannot make it look good, it's probably not the drill for him. Because his motor preferences are not going to be done correctly and treated correctly in this drill to allow him to have success. So terrestrials prefer flexion, aerials prefer extension. Now, the next one is terrestrials prefer adduction, and aerials prefer abduction. Now, all this means is that adduction is meaning you like your body parts moving closer to midline, coming back to midline. So if you're adducting your shoulders, I mean, you're bringing them closer to the midline. If you're abducting your shoulders, I mean, you're going out here, right? So this is why you'll see guys like aerials in particular, like a Randy Johnson is one of the guys they talk about in a video, who's a famous, what they would categorize as an aerial pitcher. And the reason he has a lot of at extension and arms are, long arms when he's throwing, right? Even though there's a lot of guys out there in pitching baseball that want to have that short arm, you want to have that short arm slot, short arm circle, stay connected to the body. Well, if you're a terrestrial, that's going to work really well. But if you're an aerial and you're trying to do that and stay close to your midline and that's not how your body performs, you may struggle with that. So this gives you insight into, man, why is my buddy did this stuff and it made him so much better and I'm just not feeling the same results? Well, your buddy may be a terrestrial, you may be an aerial. And guys, I'm still a beginner in a lot of this as I'm diving into the research and reading the book. So if I may mix up some of these things, but I'm trying to give you guys the information that I think is really revolutionary in baseball. Now, the next one would be this. Terrestrials prefer thrust. Aerials prefer rebound. So a terrestrial, when you're talking to them and talking cues, a terrestrial is really going to benefit from trying to really just thrust into a thing, right? Using a maximum amount of force, pushing off, everything like that. An aerial is about, they're bouncy. They like rebound. So if you tell an aerial to, drive, push, it's not going to work very well for them. Their body does not function like that. The first thing I saw in one of the videos was that aerials tend to walk with their shoulders forward. And immediately I knew I was an aerial. Because my whole life, my grandfather walked that way. My whole life is like, you walk just like your grandfather. And I always thought it's kind of weird that I walk. Why is my natural gait leaning forward? I never knew why. I thought maybe it's, there was something wrong when I was growing up. And the reality is I'm an aerial. I prefer to be in the air. I prefer to be in the air longer in my strides. I'm a bounding runner. I'm not a thrusting runner. And so it was crazy. I started watching these videos and I'm immediately identifying things in myself that I wish I would have known in my own baseball career. Guys, this channel is about helping you guys develop and figure out the best paths forward in your career. And if I were you, if I was a player, from the 3 or 4 hours I've put into diving into this so far, I would go all in on this. I'm talking go get a motor preferences assessment. That you are going to learn so much about how your body works and functions. And again, one of the things Matt talks about in a lot of these videos is that you are born this way. He asks everybody that's watching his presentation to cross their arms. He said, now cross them the other way. And you immediately are like, it feels weird because that's a motor preference. Your motor preference is to cross your arms like this. And so if you're told to cross, you're not doing it right, you're not hitting right, cross your arms the other way. And you're like, but that doesn't, I can't do that. And I found that was true in my career when I was working on developing, trying to fix my swing to where I could drive the ball a little bit more in the air. I found that a lot of these things that a lot of guys I knew were doing did not work for me. And I think that's probably because, and actually Jimmy Jackson, Matt's pitching coach at Maryland, he talked about a lot of pitching drills now are 100% catered to terrestrial. So if you're a terrestrial and you're doing like driveline stuff or anything else, you're probably okay because a lot of this stuff is based on thinking that the best way to do things is in a terrestrial way because they don't know the motor preference stuff. So if you're an aerial pitcher and you're doing a lot of this kind of next level training, like high cutting edge training, what a lot of people think it is, you're probably not going to be developing the way you could be because you're an aerial. You have to do things differently. You cannot function and gain. You're not going to see the results from drills designed for a terrestrial if you're an aerial, right? And so and there's a lot more motor preferences than just terrestrial and aerial. And so now you guys are seeing where I'm getting. There's just this one category. They're complete opposites. Now this is a spectrum. That's one thing that Matt would say and David Genest would say is that this is a spectrum. So you could be a guy who's like straight up all the way edge aerial, all the way in the end. You could be a guy who's all the way super terrestrial. You could be a guy that's really in the middle, and so you're going to have to figure out drills that are different based for you. And that's why I suggest like a motor preferences assessment, because then you're going to go in and you're really going to get to figure out, okay, are you an aerial? Are you a terrestrial? How much of an aerial are you, etc. Like knowing myself, I'm assuming that knowing how my own body functions and everything like that, I would suggest to myself I'm probably pretty close to like full aerial. Obviously, there's probably not a lot of guys that are just like 100% that, but this is how I could not stop reading and watching videos on this last night. It was just mind-blowing, because it was one of those things as a former player that you look back and you think, what would my career have been if I had access to this information? If I had discovered I was an aerial and I can't be training like guys that are terrestrial that use the ground very well, right? Your terrestrial runners are very straight up and down. I mean, they're in the ground, they're at flexion, there's not a lot of extension in their running. Your aerial runners are bounding. They're full extension, they're in the air way more. You see those long stride runners, that's like an aerial type thing, because you're bounding, right? And with the terrestrial, you may be a really fast guy, but you're a shorter stride guy. You're in the ground longer. You're a terrestrial. So you have to train differently if you're one or the other. And Matt, I mean, we're going to get into this as I continue to read, but they think there's 12 different assessments that they do to really individualize this, so you know exactly kind of what works for you, what doesn't. And Matt's whole point in this is that there is no one best way. Everybody is different. Nobody is the exact same. And that's why I've told you guys, again, subconsciously, maybe I knew a little bit about motor preferences, but if you're not Mike Trout, you should not try to emulate Mike Trout, because you're never going to move like Mike Trout. His body is unique. His deficiencies in flexibility, his efficiencies in other areas, you don't have the same thing. So you're never going to be able to totally replicate, and especially if you're not in the same category as Mike Trout and you're trying to hit like him, you're going to feel terrible. It's not going to go well. So I hope you like this, guys. There's actually a lot more we could even talk about between aerial and terrestrial, but I'm just in the beginning of this book now, and as I continue to read through it and try to do more research and just get really more up to speed on it, I will do more videos based on this, but highly recommend getting the book, Motor Preferences for Baseball by Matt Swope and David Genest. I think I'm saying David's last name right. He's French, and that is kind of, Motor Preferences was first developed in Europe, and so it's very new in the US and not a lot of people know about it. So if you want to be in the cutting edge, reach out to these guys. I'm serious. They're big for development and everything like that. These guys are going to do a great job, and everything I've seen, I've just loved it. So appreciate all the support, guys, and comments and everything like that. Let me know what you think about this. We'll be back again with another video tomorrow.